The ballroom glittered like a mirage. Chandeliers dripping gold, marble floors reflecting every shimmer of light, and 1,000 guests dressed in white and desert beige. Cameras hovered like silent hawks above the celebration, capturing the union of Sheikh Khalid Al Mansour, one of Dubai's most powerful men, and Amira Saad, the young woman chosen to be his bride. He stood tall in his ivory thobe, a man of poise and prestige, every gesture deliberate, every word rehearsed. To his people, he was the image of composure, a sheik whose welcome moved empires and whose smile could command silence. Yet beneath the carefully trimmed beard and watchful eyes, something colder pulsed. He studied Amira not with affection, but with calculation, as if she were a jewel to be evaluated before being locked away. Amira entered the hall in a gown that trailed behind her like liquid starlight. The guests gasped, phones lifted, lenses zoomed. She walked with grace, her chin high, her veil trembling slightly with each breath. But behind her dark lashes, fear hid in plain sight. Her gaze drifted over the crowd. Faces of strangers, dignitaries, ministers, journalists, searching for one person who wasn't there. She forced a smile as the sheik extended his hand. "Welcome to your forever," he murmured, voice low, smooth, but heavy with expectation. "Thank you," she replied, almost inaudibly. Their hands touched, a moment that was meant to seal a union, but instead sparked unease. The heat of his skin burned through her gloves. For a second, her smile faltered and the camera lights flashed like lightning, freezing her hesitation in pixels that would later flood the news feeds. The master of ceremony spoke of purity, devotion, and legacy. Every word made Amira's heartbeat louder. She heard whispers ripple through the women seated near the stage, fragments of gossip carried by jeweled lips. She's not from a royal family. I heard she lived in Beirut alone before this. They say she was involved with someone. The words sliced through the music. She gripped her bouquet tighter, white petals trembling in her hand. Khalid noticed. His eyes flicked toward her, sharp as a blade. "Smile," he said under his breath, lips barely moving. She obeyed. Narration and music filled the vast hall as dancers performed before the couple, spinning gold ribbons through the air. The sheik watched, detached, offering polite nods while his mind drifted elsewhere, to the vows of purity whispered by his mother years ago, to the humiliation he once endured when a fiancé betrayed his trust. A man's honor begins with his wife. Her voice echoed in his mind, and dies with her shame. Amira tried to breathe. Her corset pressed against her ribs, her pulse fluttered at her throat. The crowd's applause sounded distant, muffled, like waves breaking behind glass. When the ceremony ended, photographers surrounded them, capturing what they believed to be love. She turned slightly toward him for the final shot, her eyes glistening. From a distance, it could be mistaken for joy, but the close-up told another story. The reception followed, filled with laughter, rosewater, and the metallic clink of champagne glasses. Guests toasted to eternal happiness. Yet the groom barely touched his drink. He observed her, how she interacted with his family, how she lowered her eyes when spoken to, how her laughter felt studied. Later that night, as the orchestra faded and the guests began to leave, Khalid leaned toward her and whispered, "Tomorrow, the world will see us as one. Tonight, I will see who you truly are." Her breath caught. The words were soft, but their meaning cut deep, a promise wrapped in threat. Outside, the desert wind howled across the city, sweeping the golden confetti from palace steps. Inside, the new bride smiled dimmed under the heavy glow of chandeliers, as if she already sensed the darkness waiting behind the closed doors of their honeymoon suite. And as the lights of the ballroom dimmed, the last camera flash caught her eyes, wide, uncertain, glimmering with something far from love. The limousine's tinted glass mirrored Amira's face as it cut through the neon-lit streets of Dubai. The city outside shimmered with opulence, endless towers of glass, gold, and quiet judgment. Yet inside the car, silence wrapped her like a shroud. The echoes of Sheikh Khalid's words from the night before still trembled in her chest. "Tonight, I will see who you truly are." She pressed her palm against her abdomen, trying to slow the storm within. Her reflection stared back, flawless makeup, diamond necklace, and a practiced smile. To the world, she was the picture of triumph, the poor girl who rose to royalty. But beneath the layers of silk and ceremony, another woman existed, one shaped by scars no camera could capture. She closed her eyes, and Beirut returned to her. The memories came sharp and fast. The cramped apartment filled with cigarette smoke, her father's debts mounting after his business failed, her mother's tears as men came to collect what they were owed. At 19, Amira had promised herself she'd never live like that again. She studied, modeled part-time, learned how to charm, how to survive. And then came Nabil, a musician with callous hands and a voice that could soften even her hardest days. They met at a rooftop cafe overlooking the Mediterranean, where he sang for tips and dreams. With him, she laughed easily. She loved fiercely. For a moment, she believed love could save her. But love didn't pay bills, and when her father fell ill, reality came knocking. College proposal arrived to an old family friend. Wealth beyond imagination, a palace, security. Her mother's voice trembled when she told her, "This is our chance. Amira, you'll never know hunger again." But Nabil's voice came later that night, raw and desperate over phone. "You're selling your soul. Habibti. You think he'll love you? You think men like him forgive the past?" She had no answer. She only cried, quietly, as Beirut's rain tapped against the glass. Amira's mind flickered back to that final call, just 3 days before her wedding. She had been alone in her hotel suite, staring out at the Gulf. The phone glowed with his name. Against every warning, she answered, "Don't do this." Nabil had said. His tone wasn't angry anymore, just broken. "He'll destroy you once he finds out." Her heart thudded painfully. "He won't," she whispered. "He can't. You can't hide the truth forever." "I'm not hiding," she lied. "I'm surviving." There was a long silence before his voice cracked. "Then survive without me?" The line went dead. She remembered how her hand trembled, the sound of waves below the balcony, the sting of shame that no diamond could wash away. That night, she deleted his number, or tried to. Her finger hovered over the screen, but she couldn't press confirm. The car stopped suddenly, pulling her back to the present. They had arrived at Kala's private estate, the place she would now call home. The guards bowed as the doors opened, and she stepped out, her heels clicking against imported marble. The palace loomed ahead, a fortress dressed as paradise. Inside, servants stood in perfect lines, their eyes lowered. Every corner gleamed, but Amira felt the chill beneath the perfection. She walked through long corridors, her gown whispering across the floor, her mind still trapped in Beirut. In her suite, she closed the door and finally exhaled. She sat before the mirror, unclasping her earrings, layer by layer, stripping away the image she had built. Her reflection blurred as tears gathered. Somewhere deep down, she knew Nabil was right. Secrets have a way of surviving, even when love doesn't. Her phone buzzed, a private number. Her heart froze. She hesitated before answering. Silence. Then a familiar breath. "Amira," a voice whispered. It was Nabil. Her pulse quickened. "You can't call me anymore." "I had to warn you," he interrupted, panic lace in every word. "He's not who you think he is. Get out before." A knock thundered on her door. "Madam," came the guard's voice. "The sheik wishes to see you." Her blood ran cold. She ended the call, her hands shaking. Through the mirror, she caught her own reflection again. Painted, perfect, terrified. Outside the door waited the man who would become both her protector and her undoing. And as she rose to meet him, she whispered her reflection, "Just one more lie." It would not be her last. The moon hung low over the desert, washing Sheikh Khalid's estate in pale light. Inside his private study, silence reigned, the kind of silence that feels deliberate, heavy, sacred. Khalid sat at his desk, hands clasped before him, watching the reflection of the chandelier flicker across his glass of tea. From the corridor, faint footsteps approached, soft and measured. He didn't turn. "Come in," he said. The door opened and his mother entered. The matriarch, the unspoken force behind his empire, draped in black silk, her face framed by age and authority. She carried the quiet dignity of generations of royal women who had shaped men like him. "I saw her tonight," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Your bride. Beautiful, polite. You chose well." Khalid's jaw tightened. "Beauty is easy to find," he replied. "Purity is not." The old woman's eyes flickered with approval and concern in equal measure. "You still measure women by purity?" He looked up, gaze sharp. "A man's bloodline depends on it. A house built on deceit collapses." She sighed, folding her hands. "You speak as your father once did. And you remember how his words destroyed him." Khalid's stare hardened. Yes, he remembered. Years ago, long before the glittering halls and obedient servants, there had been another woman, Layla. She was his first engagement, a quiet scholar he adored. Their union had promised balance, her intellect softening his pride. But weeks before their wedding, rumors spread, whispers that she'd met another man abroad. There was no proof, no confession, just gossip. Yet it was enough. The family forced her away, her name erased. Khalid had stood in that same room, humiliated, powerless, a man mocked behind closed doors. That night, his father told him, "You failed to guard your honor." The memory still burned. He took a slow breath now, forcing the ghost back into silence. "I will not repeat that mistake," he said. "Amira will respect this house, as she should." His mother's gaze lingered on him. "Do you love her?" He smiled faintly, a cold, calculated smile. "Love is not the foundation of marriage, Mother. Discipline is." The words hung between them like smoke. After she left, Khalid rose and walked toward the window. Outside, the city pulsed with life, light stretching endlessly toward the horizon. He had built his empire on control, on order. He believed chaos was born from emotion, and emotion was weakness. Women, he thought, were both the source and the test of that weakness. He remembered Amira's trembling smile, her silence beneath the spotlight, the hesitation when he touched her hand. Something in that hesitation unsettled him. It was not innocence. It was fear, and fear to him was proof of concealment. He reached into his drawer and pulled out an ornate silver box. Inside were letters, brittle, yellowed, each sealed with Layla's name. He stared at them for a long time, then closed the lid sharply, as if burying the past to secure the future. Control. That was his faith now. Khalid turned to the mirror, adjusting his robe. "A man's first night," he murmured to himself, repeating his mother's words, "tells him who he truly married." His reflection looked back, regal, unyielding, but hollow behind the eyes. From the adjoining room came the faint echo of laughter. Amira's voice, speaking to one of the maids. It was soft, uncertain, human. Yet to Khalid, it sounded like a challenge. He straightened his posture, the muscles in his jaw tensing. "She will learn her place," he whispered. Outside, the desert wind shifted, whispering through the palm trees like a warning. Khalid extinguished the lamp and left the study, his steps echoing down the long corridor toward her chamber, toward the night that would test them both. And somewhere deep within him, something ancient and dangerous began to stir. The suite was a kingdom of its own, a palace suspended above the Persian Gulf. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the dark sea, jeweled lights dancing on the surface like broken stars. White rose petals covered the bed. Incense drifted through the air, mingling with the faint hum of the city below. Amira stood by the balcony, her back to the room, watching the waves. The night air brushed against her skin, cool and unsettling. Her gown shimmered faintly under the moonlight, and for a brief moment she imagined herself disappearing into that horizon, a speck swallowed by the endless black. Behind her, Khalid loosened the gold buttons of his bisht and set aside. He watched her in silence, studying the line of her shoulders, the way her breath rose and fell too quickly. She looked like something fragile pretending to be brave. "You're quiet," he said finally. His tone was calm, but something beneath it was taut, a wire waiting to snap. Amira turned slowly, forcing a smile. "It's been a long day." "Indeed." He walked closer, his polished shoes barely making a sound on the marble. "But the night has just begun." She tried to steady herself as he reached for her hand. His touch was firm, deliberate, When his fingers brushed her wrist, she flinched, small, involuntary, but unmistakable. He froze. "What was that?" "Nothing," she whispered. "Just nerves." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Nerves or guilt?" Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly, but his eyes didn't follow. A bride should tremble with excitement, not fear. He moved closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "Unless she has something to hide." Amira took a step back, her voice trembling. "You're imagining things. I'm just tired." "Stop." His voice was no longer soft. It was sharp, slicing through the room's quiet elegance. He studied her face, his gaze sweeping her from head to toe. Not with desire, but suspicion. "Tell me, Amira, have you ever been with another man?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. He waited. The seconds stretched thin, the silence louder than any scream. The only sound was the slow ticking of the wall clock, cruel, deliberate, marking each heartbeat. Amira turned away, staring out the window again. "Why would you ask me that?" "Because I see it," he said coldly. "In your eyes, in the way you avoid my touch." "You're wrong." "Then prove me wrong." She swallowed hard. "I don't need to prove anything." That answer broke something in him. He grabbed her arm, not hard enough to bruise, not yet, but enough to make her wince. "Every man is judged by the woman he marries," he said, "and I will not be mocked again." Amira pulled free, her voice trembling. "This isn't about honor, Khalid. It's about control." His eyes flashed. "Control keeps chaos from spreading. And fear destroys everything else," she said, barely louder than a breath. For a heartbeat, there was only silence, the kind that drowns reason. Then, with unsettling calm, he reached for her veil and let it fall to the floor. The gesture, meant to be tender, carried menace. He stared at her, every inch of her, searching for the lie he was certain existed. "You think I don't know," he murmured. "Do you think I can't tell?" Amira's voice broke. "Please stop this." But he wasn't listening anymore. He was lost somewhere deep within himself, in memory, in pride, in madness. His words came low and venomous. "A man can forgive a thief, a liar, even a murderer, but not a woman who shames his name." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know enough." He turned away, pacing the edge of the bed, running his hand through his hair as if fighting invisible demons. The scent of roses and incense thickened, suffocating. When he looked at her again, there was nothing human left in his gaze, only the echo of a man consumed by his own myth. She took a step back, trembling. "Khalid, please." He moved toward her slowly, deliberately, his expression eerily calm. The window behind her caught the reflection. Two figures, one advancing, one shrinking, framed against a restless ocean. Outside, the waves crashed harder against the rocks. Inside, time fractured. Her voice, faint and trembling, was the last fragile thing holding the room together. "You said this was forever." "It will be," he said, "in the way truth always is." The word hung like smoke, and the light in his eyes flickered into something dangerous. Amira stepped back again, her hand brushing the edge of the table where a vase of white roses stood. One petal fell, soft, silent, inevitable. The air shifted. The storm had begun. The sound split through the suite, like lightning, glass and petals scattering across the marble floor. Amira stumbled backward, her breath breaking in short, panicked bursts. Khalid's chest heaved as he stared at her, eyes dark and wild, veins pulsing along his temples. The mask of dignity he'd worn his entire life was gone, stripped away by suspicion, by pride, by something far older than reason. "Tell me the truth," he roared, the words trembling with fury. "I am telling you the truth," she cried. "Please, Khalid, listen to me." Her voice cracked, desperate, but her plea only deepened his rage. "You think I don't see it?" His voice rose, then dropped to a growl. "You flinched at my touch, lied with your eyes, and now you beg for mercy like I'm the monster?" Tears blurred her vision. "Because you are scaring me." He stepped closer. "Scaring you?" His laugh was hollow. "Do you know what fear is? Amira, fear is watching your name become a joke. Fear is living as a man whose wife belongs to another. I never belonged to anyone, she screamed. The word struck him like a blade. He froze for a heartbeat. Then his face twisted into disbelief. Say that again. I said I never belonged to anyone, she whispered, trembling. Not you, not him. I am... His hand flew before she could finish. The slap echoed through the room, sharp and final. Amira's head snapped to the side, her earrings scattering to the floor. For a moment, there was only the faint hum of the ocean outside, whispering against the glass. Khalid's breath came in ragged bursts. He looked down at his hand. The hand had just struck her, and for a fleeting second, a shadow of regret crossed his eyes. But pride smothered it before it could grow. Amira's lip trembled. Blood glistened where his ring had cut her skin. You don't have to do this, she whispered, voice shaking. We can talk. Talk, he spat. You had your chance to talk before you deceived me. Her tears fell freely now, tracing the outline of her trembling chin. I didn't deceive you. I loved once, yes, but it was before you, before any of this. You knew the woman you were marrying. You just didn't want her to be real. Khalid's face turned red, his fists tightening. Real? You mean impure. Used. She flinched. Don't say that. Why not? His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. Because it's true. He lunged forward, grabbing her by the shoulders. You shamed me, he hissed. You brought filth into my home. She struggled, crying out, but his grip only tightened. Khalid, please, she gasped. I beg you to see me, not the stories, not your fear, me. Her words seemed to reach him for an instant. His fingers loosened. Her tears touched his wrist. But then something inside him snapped. The memory of his father's voice, the years of whispers, the echo of every humiliation he'd ever buried. He shoved her away. She fell hard against the edge of the bed, the air leaving her lungs in a broken sound. Khalid. He moved toward her, eyes unfocused, steps uneven. The room tilted around him. Roses, silk, moonlight blurring into one fevered hallucination. No one will laugh at me again, he murmured. Then came the scream, a sound so raw, so human, it barely seemed to belong to her. It was swallowed instantly by the sea wind pushing through the open balcony doors. The lamps flickered, casting frantic shadows. The final sound was a dull thud of a struggle ending, the heavy silence that followed louder than any cry. When the moonlight settled again, the room was still. White silk sheets, once perfect, were streaked with red. The perfume of roses lingered, sweet and sickening. Khalid stood over her, his chest rising and falling, eyes fixed on nothing. He sank to his knees beside her, the enormity of what he'd done creeping in like frost. His fingers brushed her cheek, still warm, still soft, as if touch could undo the ruin. Outside, the waves crashed harder, indifferent. Inside, blood bloomed slowly across silk, the color guilt of pride, of love twisted beyond recognition. And as the night stretched in, only one truth remained. Honor had won. Humanity had died. The silence after the scream was unbearable. Only the sound of the sea filled the suite now, calm, almost mocking. Khalid stood motionless beside the bed, his breathing shallow, his hands trembling as if they no longer belonged to him. Amira's body lay still, her eyes half open, reflecting the ceiling lights in ghostly fragments. He tried to speak her name, but it caught in his throat. The enormity of what he had done pressed against his chest, crushing him. For a moment, he wanted to undo it, to wake her, to beg forgiveness, but the thought was useless. The Sheikh of Dubai could not undo murder. His mind began to move faster than his conscience. Think, control the story, protect the name. That was what his father had always taught him. A scandal kills faster than a bullet. He grabbed his phone, his fingers slick with sweat. Hamad, he said when the call connected. His voice was hoarse, broken. Come, now, don't ask questions. Within 20 minutes, Hamad was at the door, loyal to a fault. He entered without hesitation and froze. The scene before him made his blood run cold. Ya Allah, he whispered. Your Highness, what? Don't, Khalid snapped. Don't say it. Don't think it. He turned away from the bed, pacing like a man cornered by his own shadow. You will help me. No one must know. Hamad swallowed hard. There are cameras, guards, staff. This will not be easy. Khalid's gaze was sharp, feverish. Then make it easy. Delete the footage. Replace it. You will say she collapsed, a heart condition. Write it down, record it, sign it, whatever it takes. Hamad hesitated. And the body? For a moment, Khalid didn't answer. His hand brushed the silk sheets again, the stain spreading like a wound that refused to close. Prepare her for transfer, he murmured. We'll move her before sunrise. Tell the palace physician to declare cardiac failure. He'll obey. The aide nodded slowly. Yes, Your Highness. They moved quickly after that, Hamad issuing quiet orders down the hall, dismissing the guards, silencing the cameras, paying off whoever might ask too many questions. By dawn, the story had begun to take shape. A young bride dead of sudden illness. The sheikh, heartbroken but dignified in his grief. It was perfect. Almost, except for the maid. Layla had been polishing the crystal lamps near the hallway when she heard the first crash. Then came the muffled shouts, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor, and finally, silence. She crept closer, heart pounding, and peered through the small crack in the door before anyone noticed her. What she saw would never leave her. Later, when Hamad's men began cleaning, she hid behind the curtains, watching as they stripped the bed and replaced the bloodied sheets. Her gaze fell to something glittering near the corner of the rug, a small golden earring, the one she'd seen Amira wearing earlier that night. Before she could stop herself, she bent down and slipped it into her pocket. Her hands shook as she did it, not out of greed, but out of instinct, a need to hold on to something real, something that proved she hadn't imagined the horror of what happened. When Ahmad passed by, his eyes swept over her. You saw nothing, he warned, voice low. Do your work and forget tonight. She nodded quickly, lowering her gaze. But as she walked away, she felt the earring press against her thigh through the thin fabric of her uniform. A silent weight, a reminder. By noon, the official statement had been released to the press. Sheikh Khalid's new wife, Amira al-Hassan, tragically passed away due to a sudden heart condition. The royal family requests privacy in this difficult time. The news spread like wildfire. Social media filled with condolences, candle emojis, and edited photos of the couple smiling on their wedding day. Few noticed that the images were cropped just enough to hide the unease in Amira's eyes. Inside the palace, the staff moved like ghosts, careful, silent, pretending. Hamad stood by the window, watching the press vehicles gather outside the gates. It's done, he said. No one will question it. Khalid didn't answer. He stood at the mirror, staring at his reflection, his immaculate white kandura, his steady posture, the faint red mark still under his nail. No one, he repeated softly, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted, restless, toward the sea beyond the glass, the same sea that had swallowed her last scream. Outside, Layla walked past the gates, carrying her small bag of belongings. Her shift was over. She kept her head down, her steps quick. Inside her pocket, the golden earring gleamed faintly in the afternoon sun, the only piece of truth left unburied. And as she looked back once toward the towering palace, she whispered under her breath, "Someone will know," and someone would. It started as a whisper in the palace, and within days, it reached the Ministry of Justice. An unnamed officer submitted a confidential memo citing inconsistencies in Amira al-Hassan's death report. The memo was thin, almost hesitant, but it was enough to raise the first official eyebrow. By the time it reached the desk of Inspector Said al-Nwami, the file had already been stamped with red ink, sensitive, handled discreetly. He opened it in silence. A 24-year-old bride, deceased on her wedding night. No autopsy, no visible record of hospital transport. Cause of death, cardiac failure. Said's instincts prickled. He'd seen these kind of reports before. Clean on paper, dirty underneath. But this case had a name too powerful to touch. Sheikh Khalid al-Mansur. Still, Something about it bothered him. The perfection, the performance. He called in 2 officers and quietly opened a routine verification, careful not to call it an investigation. "We're just checking paperwork," he told them. No statements, no noise. But even as he said it, he knew it wouldn't stay quiet for long. Across the city, Rania Haddad was already digging. The anonymous email had consumed her thoughts. She replayed the footage fragment over and over, zooming in on Amira's expression. Something haunted in her eyes, a tension that felt like a premonition. Her editor warned her to back off. "This is royal business, Rania. You poke too hard, you'll lose your credentials or worse." But Rania had covered corruption, disappearances, and cover-ups before. Fear was part of the job, but silence was complicity. So she started making calls. First, she reached out to Amira's family in Beirut. Her mother, Salma. The woman's voice cracked through the phone. "They told us she was happy. They sent a private jet for her wedding." And then, suddenly, she was gone. Rania's tone softened. Did she ever mention fear? Anything unusual? A long pause. Then, she said she didn't think he would understand her past. That he wanted perfection, not a person. That night, Rania sat by her window, scrolling through Amira's old social media posts. Smiling photos, fashion events, glimpses of a glamorous life that now looked like camouflage. One post stood out, a piano in the background, a caption in Arabic. "Some music never leaves your soul." That was how Rania found Nabil Khoury. He was a musician, dark-eyed, soft-spoken, living in a small studio apartment near Dera. When she arrived, he hesitated at the door, half expecting a trap. "I'm not here to ruin her memory," Rania assured him. "I just want the truth." They sat opposite each other, the room filled with the faint scent of oud and old grief. "She was my world," Nabil said quietly, but she wanted to escape Beirut, escape the debts, the gossip, everything. Her family pushed her toward the Sheikh like it was salvation. Did she ever say she was afraid of him? He nodded slowly. "She called me 3 days before the wedding. She said he asked questions about her past. Too many. She said, he looks at me like I'm a reflection of someone who disappointed him." Rania wrote every word. When Nabil showed her a voice note Amira had sent, trembling, tearful, her heart clenched. "If I don't call again, please don't look for me. He doesn't like secrets." That was enough for Rania. She pieced together the timeline, the lavish wedding, the missing footage, the falsified medical report. Each thread led back to one man, a sheikh known for philanthropy, yet feared by those who served him. Meanwhile, inside the ministry, Inspector Said received an unexpected order. "Close the file," his superior said curtly. "It's a family matter. Do not proceed." Said stared at the document, the red seal bleeding across the paper like guilt. "With respect, sir, there are inconsistencies." Then erased them. When he left the office, the memo in his hand felt heavier than it should. 2 nights later, Rania received a text from an unknown number. "Meet me where truth drowns." It was unsigned, but her gut told her it came from inside the palace. She printed her notes, sealed them in an envelope, and left them on her desk labeled, "If something happens to me." Then she grabbed her recorder and keys. As she stepped into the humid Dubai night, her reflection caught in the car mirror, calm, determined, unaware that she was now walking straight into the storm Khalid had tried so hard to bury. The investigation wasn't closed. It had only just begun. It began with a leak. Rania's first article, carefully worded, deeply sourced, went live just before dawn. The untold death of Amira al-Hassan. Questions surrounding the Sheikh's bride. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Screens lit up across Dubai, then Beirut, then London. Hashtags trended, comment sections exploded, and news anchors spoke the word the palace had hoped would never be spoken. Murder, cover-up, corruption. By noon, the royal office released a sharp statement. All allegations are false and defamatory. The Sheikh is cooperating fully with authorities. Khalid appeared on national television, his expression controlled, his voice calm. "My wife's death was a tragedy," he said. "It wounds me that people seek to turn grief into gossip. But behind the polished exterior, the walls of his empire were starting to crumble. The palace buzzed with tension. Staff whispered of investigations, of journalists being questioned, of Layla's sudden disappearance. Some said she had been sent back to Lebanon. Others swore she never left the palace grounds at all. And Ahmad, the ever-loyal aide, was unraveling. For days, he couldn't sleep. The images of that night haunted him. The broken glass, the lifeless bride, the Sheikh's trembling hands. He had told himself he was protecting his ruler, his country, his name. But now, as the world pointed fingers and Rania's reports grew sharper, the truth burned through him like acid. He began drinking, quietly, alone. Each sip made the voices louder. Each drop brought Amira's face closer. It was raining that night when he finally made his choice. Rania was working late in her small office, surrounded by stacks of notes, voice recordings, and photographs. Thunder rolled over the city as she typed, her eyes burning from exhaustion. When the knock came, she jumped. She opened the door cautiously. A man stood there, drenched from rain, his white kandura clinging to his frame. His face was pale, drawn, eyes sunken with guilt. "Ahmad," he said softly, as though reminding himself of his own name. Rania froze. She had seen him in photos, always at the Sheikh's side. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I know," he replied, "but I can't carry this anymore." He stepped inside, glancing over his shoulder before closing the door. From his pocket, he pulled a small cloth pouch and placed it on her desk. Inside was a single golden earring, delicate, blood-stained, unmistakable. Rania's breath caught. "Where did you get this?" "From her room," he said, voice shaking. "The night she died." He sat down heavily, rubbing his face with trembling hands. He lost control. She tried to tell him the truth, but his words broke. He wouldn't hear it. She begged him to stop. He didn't. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain against the window. "Why tell me this now?" Rania asked. "Because lies rot from the inside," Ahmad whispered. "And I can't breathe anymore." He stood abruptly, his resolve collapsing into despair. "Do what you must. But understand, once this goes public, they'll come for both of us." Before she could reply, he was gone, swallowed by the storm outside. Rania sat motionless, the earring in her palm, its weight cold and undeniable. This was no rumor, no whisper, it was proof. She looked out into the rain-smeared night, her reflection fractured in the glass. Somewhere out there, power was cracking, and as the thunder rumbled across the city, she whispered to herself, "Now the truth bleeds." What came next would tear Dubai apart. The storm that had begun as a whisper now roared across the Arab world. Within 48 hours of Rania's exposé, armed with Ahmad's recorded confession and the damning earring, the palace's carefully constructed silence shattered. International outlets picked up the story. Hashtags turned into movements. Hashtag Justice for Amira trended across continents. The royal office issued frantic denials, but it was too late. Someone, perhaps from inside, leaked the missing surveillance footage to the press. It showed Amira entering the honeymoon suite with Khalid and never emerging. Hours later, Ahmad and 2 guards were seen carrying out a covered stretcher. No statement could erase what millions had now seen. The government, under immense diplomatic and public pressure, had no choice but to act. A team of investigators arrived at Al Mansour Palace at dawn, cameras flashing as black cars lined the marble drive. Khalid watched from his balcony, his expression unreadable. When they finally knocked on his door, he didn't resist. He adjusted his cufflinks, lifted his chin, and said calmly, "I will answer to Allah, not to them." The arrest footage spread worldwide. The once untouchable sheikh being led down the palace steps, surrounded by officers. The image became an icon, the fall of power cloaked in white. The trial began 3 weeks later. Security was tight, emotions tighter. Journalists filled every seat. Protesters crowded the streets outside. Inside the courtroom, Rania sat among the press, her pen trembling slightly as she took notes. The prosecution laid out the evidence with precision. Falsified medical reports, missing footage, blood traces on the suite's balcony railing, and Ahmad's recorded testimony. When Ahmad took the stand, his voice cracked but held steady. She begged him to stop, he repeated, and he called her unworthy. His confession drew a gasp from the courtroom, his eyes wet but resolute. Then came Khalid's turn. He stood tall, his face pale but proud. "I am not a murderer," he declared, voice echoing through the chamber. "I am a man who defended his honor." She lied. She deceived me. In our world, purity is sacred. A hush fell over the room. The judge leaned forward. "And who appointed you the hand of God?" For the first time, Khalid's composure cracked. "She made me lose face before the world," he shouted. "You know what that means in our culture. A man without honor is already dead." Rania wrote the words down slowly, not as a quote, but as a verdict on a soul. When the court adjourned for the day, the world outside was no longer divided between believers and skeptics. It was divided between those who saw a man clinging to tradition and those who saw a monster hiding behind it. Weeks passed. The final session arrived like a storm on a calm horizon. Cameras broadcast a verdict live across the Middle East. The judge's tone was grave, his words deliberate. "Sheikh Khalid al-Mansour, you are found guilty of the unlawful killing of Amira al-Hassan. In defense of honor, you dishonored life itself." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some gasped, others wept. Khalid stood motionless, eyes fixed on the judge. His sentence, life imprisonment, without royal pardon. Outside, the air vibrated with disbelief. For the first time in Dubai's modern history, a royal man of power had been stripped of protection, judged not by title but by truth. Rania's closing article captured it best. He killed her for not being pure. Yet in doing so, he exposed the impurity of his own heart, the stain no silk or status could ever hide. As the cell door clanged shut behind him, Khalid whispered to the emptiness, "I only wanted honor." But the echo that answered him sounded more like judgment than forgiveness. And somewhere far beyond prison walls, a soft wind carried Amira's name, not as a scandal, but as a memory finally set free. Justice had arrived not in silence, but in truth. 6 months after the verdict, the city had changed, or at least it pretended to. New laws were drafted about women's rights, media ethics, and domestic investigations. Officials gave speeches about progress and justice. But beneath the surface, Dubai still carried a quiet, uneasy pulse, the kind that comes from a truth too heavy to forget. Rania hadn't stopped thinking about Amira. The courtroom had closed, the articles had faded from headlines, but her story refused to die. It lingered in Rania's mind like a haunting melody she couldn't turn off. One humid evening, as she sorted through the last of her research, her phone buzzed. It was an email from Amira's mother, Salma. The message was short. "They sent back her belongings today. There is something you should see." Attached was a photo, a small leather-bound journal with Amira's initials embossed in gold. The bridal chest that had once held her wedding gown had also held this, unseen, unopened, untouched. Rania's throat tightened. 2 days later, she was in Beirut, sitting with Salma in a dim apartment overlooking the sea. The older woman's hands trembled as she passed to the journal. "It's her handwriting," she said softly. "Every word is her." Rania opened the first page. The scent of perfume still lingered faintly on the paper. The entries began weeks before the wedding, neat, graceful, filled with both hope and hesitation. They say a woman's value is measured by what she hides, not what she gives. But what if what I hide is pain? He looks at me like I am a prize, not a person. I smile, because that's what I was taught to do when men look at you that way. Each line was a wound stitched in ink. Rania read until her eyes blurred. Amira had written about her childhood dreams, to teach art, to travel, to play music again. She wrote about Nabil, the man she loved but couldn't choose. He said I deserved to be free. But freedom doesn't pay for my mother's medicine. So I chose gold over air, and now I cannot breathe. Her final entries were the hardest to read. The handwriting grew smaller, shakier, as if written in fear. He asked if I'd ever been with someone. I lied. I thought I was protecting us both. But his silence after, it was colder than any winter I've known. "If anything happens to me, tell the world I try to love in a place that doesn't forgive love. Rania closed the journal, tears stinging her eyes. She realized this wasn't just a record of one woman's tragedy. It was a mirror held up to every voice stifled by honor, fear, and expectation. When she returned to Dubai, she published the journal in full. The article was titled The Voice of the Dead. It wasn't written like news. It was written like a eulogy, each passage accompanied by Amira's words, her handwriting, her truth. The world reacted with an ache that couldn't be ignored. Social media flooded with her quotes. Vigils were held in Beirut, Cairo, and Dubai. Candles flickering beside her photos. Strangers whispering prayers for a woman they'd never met. For the first time, Amira wasn't remembered as a scandal or a victim. She was remembered as a voice, fragile, fierce, unforgettable. In her final broadcast about the case, Rania said softly, "They silenced her body, but not her truth. Amira al-Hassan wanted to be seen, and now she will never be unseen." As the screen faded to black, the camera lingered on a single page from the journal, the last line written in trembling ink. The sea was calm that night, deceptively calm. The same gulf that had swallowed Amira's final scream now shimmered under a silver moon, its waves whispering stories too ancient to forget. From a distance, the palace lights flickered faintly along the horizon, their glow reflected across the water like fragile ghosts of a life once gilded with power and lies. Rania stood on the pier, her recorder off, her pen finally still. Months had passed since the world learned Amira's truth, yet the silence after the storm fell heavier than the chaos that came before. She looked out toward the open water and imagined Amira's voice carried by the wind, steady, proud, unbroken. "Echoes," Rania whispered. "That's all we ever leave behind." Across the city, far from the glimmer of the coast, a single light burned in the isolation ward of the central prison. Behind its walls, Sheikh Khalid Al-Farouk sat on a metal bed, his white robe wrinkled, his eyes hollow. The guards called him Your Highness out of habit, but the title had lost its weight. Every night, he dreamed of her, the scent of jasmine, the soft rustle of silk, the look in her eyes before everything shattered. He had told himself he killed for honor, but honor no longer visited his thoughts. Only Amira did. On the small table beside him sat a newspaper, folded to an article with her picture, The Voice of the Dead, a year later. Below it, Rania's words cut sharper than any verdict. He silenced her to protect his name, but her silence became his punishment. Khalid traced her photograph with trembling fingers. In her eyes, he no longer saw fear, only freedom. That realization gnawed at him. He murmured to the empty room, "You wanted to be seen. Now the whole world sees you." His voice cracked into the stillness. The sound echoed off the cement, swallowed by the same kind of silence that once filled their palace bedroom. Meanwhile, outside those walls, life moved on. Layla, the maid who had hidden the earring, now worked for a women's shelter under Rania's foundation. She never spoke publicly, but in private, she told the girls, truth has a cost, but silence costs more. Her quiet defiance became its own legacy, proof that even small voices could shake empires. In Beirut, Nabil stood before a small audience, playing Amira's favorite song on his oud. The melody was tender, mournful, yet filled with something pure. Forgiveness, maybe. Between chords, he looked up at the night sky and smiled faintly. "For you," he whispered, "for what they couldn't break." Rania's final documentary aired weeks later, a closing chapter titled Echoes Over the Gulf. It opened with drone footage of the sea at dawn, the horizon painted in gold. Her narration played softly over the sound of waves. Empires fall, names fade, but truth, once spoken, never dies. The Gulf still carries her voice, the same voice that dared to love, dare to defy, and dare to be heard. The final scene returned to the prison cell. Khalid stood by the barred window, watching the moonlight dance across the desert. He closed his eyes, hearing only the faint echo of her words. "My story doesn't end when I die. It ends when they finally listen." A single tear rolled down his face. For the first time, it wasn't out of guilt, but understanding. The camera panned upward, past the prison, past the city lights, past the endless gulf glimmering beneath the moon. Rania's voice returned one last time, calm and resolute. She wasn't perfect, but she was human. And as the waves kissed the shore, the echo of her name lingered, carried by the wind, eternal over the water that had once kept her secret.